This is a world overrun by zombies. Humanity is on the brink of extinction, with the few remaining survivors scraping by in an abandoned underground mine. To enter the base, survivors must use an elevator, as the entrance is surrounded by iron fences, and the area outside is teeming with countless zombies. Their numbers are growing, and it's only a matter of time before they break through the last line of defense. Time is running out for the survivors. To find a way to combat the zombie virus, the soldiers at the base risk their lives daily to capture zombies for the doctor to study. However, his research has yet to make any significant progress, which infuriates the base's commanding officer. The constant need to capture zombies depletes their already scarce ammunition and often leads to dangerous incidents. The cost of these missions is high, and such risks are proving to be fatal. To put pressure on the researchers, the commanding officer organized a meeting, demanding they deliver satisfactory results in a short period or face severe consequences. With no other choice, the research team worked around the clock. The doctor wasn't entirely without progress. He discovered that despite their violent and bloodthirsty nature, zombies retained a shred of humanity. With patience and a reward-punishment system, they could be trained to lose their aggression, much like training a pet. One zombie, named Dawn, stood out as the smartest among the test subjects, giving the doctor a renewed sense of hope. To prove his research was on the right track, the doctor placed a toothbrush and a razor in front of Dawn, prompting Sarah and Ted to burst into laughter. Surprisingly, Dawn obliged by mimicking a shaving routine, despite having no beard and even cutting his skin in the process. His behavior was astonishing and far beyond what anyone had expected. Not only that, Dawn can even read books. Although he might not understand the content, he imitates the action convincingly. As Sarah and Ted watched in amazement, the commanding officer suddenly arrived with his men. The scene before him was startling, but the doctor reassured him and invited everyone to continue watching Dawn's talents. The doctor then placed a phone in front of Dawn. Dawn sniffed it and then put it to his ear, as if recalling its purpose. With the doctor's guidance, Dawn managed to utter his first word since becoming a zombie. The commanding officer was stunned, dropping what he was holding. The noise caught Dawn's attention, and upon seeing the officer in uniform, Dawn's expression turned serious as he gave a very precise military salute. Was Dawn a soldier in his past life? This action left the officer somewhat bewildered. The doctor suggested that the officer return the salute to see how Dawn would react. However, the officer didn't respond and dismissively referred to Dawn as a trickster. Meanwhile, Dawn held his salute, clearly expecting a response. The situation became awkward as Dawn's arm grew tired from holding the salute. Fortunately, the doctor stepped in, giving Dawn the acknowledgement he was waiting for, which finally prompted Dawn to lower his hand. The doctor then handed Dawn a handgun, aiming to continue testing his reactions. Dawn looked at the gun, finding it somewhat familiar. To everyone's astonishment, Dawn chambered around and, with a fierce expression, pointed the gun at the commanding officer. It seemed Dawn held a grudge. The officer, alarmed, pointed his gun back at Dawn, creating a tense standoff between man and zombie. The doctor quickly explained that the gun was unloaded and that he just wanted to observe Dawn's reaction. However, in the next moment, Dawn pulled the trigger, a move that startled the officer and left everyone else in disbelief. Realizing he had been tricked, Dawn looked disappointed, while the officer, now angrier than ever, raised his gun again, clearly intending to kill Dawn. The doctor immediately stepped in to shield Dawn, his prized creation. The officer was unimpressed, as he wanted a serum to cure the zombie virus, not to domesticate zombies. The doctor, unfazed, argued that this was just the beginning, akin to the early stages of human civilization. If they could stop the zombies from attacking humans, they would be close to success. He emphasized that this was the only feasible solution at the moment. Seeing the doctor's confident demeanor, the officer reluctantly decided to trust him once more. However, the next day, during a zombie capture mission, disaster struck again. Miguel's rope suddenly snapped, and the unrestrained zombie immediately attacked a soldier, tearing him apart on the spot. In the chaos, the soldier's gun misfired, hitting another soldier who was also trying to control the zombies. Sarah quickly dispatched the attacking zombie, while Miguel, feeling responsible, attempted to fight another zombie head-on. Unfortunately, he got bitten in the process. Walter intervened just in time, killing the zombie with a single shot. Fearful of turning into a zombie, the bitten Miguel ran frantically until John managed to restrain him. Seizing the opportunity, Sarah smashed Miguel's head with a rock to knock him out, then used a machete to amputate his bitten arm, and finally cauterized the wound with a torch. This series of actions temporarily halted the spread of the virus. Upon hearing the news, the officer arrived immediately. Walter wanted to eliminate Miguel to prevent any future threat, but Sarah vehemently opposed, promising to deal with Miguel herself if he showed any signs of turning. Walter was still unwilling to let Miguel off the hook, blaming him for the deaths of 2 team members due to his mistake and insisting on avenging them. The next moment, tensions escalated. Seeing that the situation, the commanding officer reluctantly lowered his gun. An internal clash would surely result in mutual destruction. After the confrontation, the group carried Miguel inside. John stayed to care for Miguel, while Sarah and Bill went to the lab to fetch some painkillers. When Sarah and Bill arrived at the doctor's lab, they were met with a shocking sight. On the table was a mutated head, which belonged to the recently bitten soldier. The doctor had used him for experiments. If the officer found out, the doctor's life would be in grave danger. Sarah wanted to end the soldier's suffering with a bullet, but Bill stopped her, fearing that the gunshot would attract unwanted attention from the officer. It was clear that staying in the base was no longer safe. They had to leave. As they were about to head back, they saw the doctor acting suspiciously. Entering the lab, they discovered him training Don. The doctor had become obsessed with his research on Don, to the point of no return. He even put headphones on Don and played music for him. The familiar melody seemed to bring Don a sense of enjoyment. When the doctor turned off the music, Don would get angry, but then the doctor taught him how to turn it back on. Amazingly, Don learned the trick after just one attempt. The doctor was delighted, while Sarah and Bill outside were even more astounded. With such excellent performance, Don was rewarded as usual. However, today's food seemed different, and the two of them started to have suspicions. At that moment, the commanding officer suddenly entered. Seeing the scene before him, he grabbed the doctor and demanded to know what he was feeding Don, since the base had run out of meat. A soldier then opened a door to reveal a soldier's corpse lying on the ground. The officer was instantly furious. Using his men as food for Don was unacceptable. Before the doctor could explain, the officer shot him down in a hail of bullets. Still unsatisfied, he tied up Ted and Sarah. The zombie research project was over, and the officer now only wanted to leave the base. Using the 3 of them as hostages, he coerced John into cooperating, as John was the only one who could fly a helicopter. For the safety of the others, John had no choice but to comply. In the next moment, Ted was shot dead, and Sarah and Bill were thrown into a zombie-infested mine. Unarmed, John could only plead desperately, but the officer was unmoved and gave him a severe beating. Unbeknownst to them, the mine actually had another exit. The 2 of them decisively bypassed the horde of zombies to search for the mine's other exit. Meanwhile, just as the soldiers were preparing to evacuate with John, they suddenly heard the sound of the elevator starting up. The officer realized something was wrong and immediately ordered Walter to investigate, unaware that Miguel had already boarded the elevator. By the time they arrived, the controller was nowhere to be found. They were in deep trouble. At that moment, Miguel had already reached the outside. He opened the iron gate and let all the zombies in, intending to destroy everyone inside the base. He used himself as bait, lying on the elevator to attract the zombies. When the elevator was filled with zombies, Miguel pressed the controller. One has to admit, he was ruthless. Meanwhile, John seized the opportunity when the officer wasn't paying attention, lunging forward to tackle him to the ground and then delivering a knockout punch. He retrieved his weapon and, instead of killing the officer, ventured into the mine to search for Sarah. When the officer regained consciousness and regrouped with the soldiers, they were met with a terrifying sight. The elevator slowly descending, filled with hordes of zombies. Seeing this, they immediately bolted, and the zombies flooded into the base. The officer, taking the lead, quickly boarded the tram, callously leaving the soldiers behind to fend for themselves. In the laboratory, Don grew impatient waiting for the doctor and absent-mindedly opened the iron chains. Stepping out, he found the doctor lying lifeless, his body already cold. Don, who lacked a concept of death, initially thought the doctor was playing a game and tried to engage him. But as the doctor remained unresponsive, Don gradually realized the truth. Surprisingly, he had developed feelings for the doctor. Filled with anger, he swept the area and stumbled upon a handgun on the ground. Without hesitation, Don picked it up and began wandering aimlessly around the base. Meanwhile, due to being unable to escape in time, several soldiers were quickly torn apart by the zombies in gruesome fashion. Only Walter remained, managing to flee to the entrance. However, he found it locked, clearly the work of the officer. With the zombies closing in, Walter resorted to firing wildly and forced his way through. However, the zombies flooded into the base behind him. Walter's luck took a turn for the worse as he collided head-on with Dawn, who was armed. Without hesitation, Dawn fired a shot, terrifying Walter, who scrambled to take cover inside a room. But Dawn was relentless. Walter, cunning as he was, hid in a corner, planning to catch Dawn off guard. Yet, to his surprise, a zombie suddenly lunged at him from behind. As he struggled to push one zombie away, another seized him and sank its teeth into him. Though he managed to dispatch the zombies in the end, he had been bitten. Facing the horde closing in, Walter, in despair, chose to end his life with a bullet. On the other side, the military officer emerged from the armory and came face to face with Dawn. Spotting the gun in Dawn's hand, the officer panicked. Without hesitation, Dawn fired a shot, hitting the officer in the shoulder just as he attempted to flee. He never imagined he would fall into Dawn's hands like this. If only he had saluted back then, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state now. Dawn, a vengeful character, relentlessly pursued the officer. Despite his low accuracy, luck was on Dawn's side as he managed to hit the officer with another bullet. The officer, now completely desperate, had no way out as Dawn closed in on him. Unable to open any doors nearby, and with no escape route ahead, the officer resorted to opening a door at the end of the corridor. To his horror, he found it filled with zombies. Attempting to retreat, he was met with another bullet from Dawn. Trapped between Dawn and the horde of zombies, the officer was overwhelmed. In his final moments, Dawn, true to his character, gave a sarcastic salute, as if teaching the officer a lesson in respect, before casually departing the scene. With the entire base now overrun by zombies, Sarah's situation was dire. Fortunately, John arrived just in time, armed and ready to assist them. Together, they fought off waves of zombies, using their weapons to clear a path. Eventually, they made it out of the mine and reached another exit. Though the elevator was malfunctioning, they opted to take the stairs, and thankfully, their ascent went smoothly. Emerging safely outside, they were met with a horde of zombies closing in on them. The trio sprinted towards safety, managing to board a helicopter just before the zombies reached them. In the story's closing scene, they arrived at a secluded island, rich in natural resources, a promising refuge from the chaos they left behind.